In order to climb in Overwatch, you not only need to die less, but make consistently impactful plays if you want to climb the ladder. That being said, the secret to climbing is actually good positioning, but so many players get this fundamentally wrong, so I'm going to cut through all the BS and give you exactly what you need in order to have god tier positioning and start to carry your games and climb very, very quickly. Now we're finally in 2024. What is your New Year's resolution? Let me know in the comments down below and smash that like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Now, first off, what is a good and a bad position? What does that even mean? Well, a bad position, this is a place where you are going to be more ineffective, you're more likely to die, and you're generally just going to be less impactful. And a good position is a place where you have options. You can make plays and you're more survivable while doing so. But the problem is a lot of players think that there is a perfect position, that once you memorize them all, you are just going to be a god. But the truth of the matter is there is no perfect position. There are a million factors that can change whether a position is strong or weak. Enemy placement, enemy characters, who you're playing, where your team is. There's a million tiny factors that add up to a good or bad position. And while I can't tell you exactly where to stand, I can give you the golden rules to have the best position possible. And if you follow these rules, you will be in great positions that will allow you to hard carry games. Now, the first rule and the easiest rule to implement is natural cover. And this is something that you'll hear a lot in a lot of guide videos and coaching. Natural cover are the general geometry on the map that abilities and damage tend to not be able to go through. Now, this isn't always going to be the case. There are certain exceptions like Hanzo, Dragon Strike, and things like that. But generally, natural cover is going to be able to stop enemies from seeing you and dealing damage to you. Now, as a general rule, you should find yourself almost always near a piece of natural cover. And this doesn't matter what character you're on. Whether you're playing a Sigma, whether you're playing an Ana or a Cassidy, doesn't matter. A piece of natural cover allows you to choose when to fight the opponent. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say there's two Casses and they're fighting in the open. It doesn't matter what happens, you have to commit to the duel because the one that runs away is the one that's going to lose. You're too far away from cover, both of you. So that means that you're going to fight until one of you emerges victorious. But here's the problem. What if you, as a Cass, get headshot? Well, at this point, you know that the other Cass doesn't really have to do very much in order to close the fight and win, and he has an advantage. But if you were near a piece of cover, you could decide that you no longer want to take the duel. And that's what cover gives you. It gives you the option to disengage from a duel. It gives you the option to not fight a duel if certain factors make it disadvantaged to you. But on the flip side, if you're the one in the open and the enemy has a cover, anytime you're advantaged in the fight, they could decide not to fight. But anytime you're losing the fight, you cannot decide to stop the fight. And the thing about Overwatch is there is no fair fight. You're not mano-a-mano fighting people in an open field, which is exactly how we dominated the British in the American Revolution. We used tactics, we used cover, we used ambushes. We did not fight people straight up. Back in the old days, it would just be two armies standing in a field and they would go at it and they would be a victor. But the problem is if you don't adhere to proper cover, you will never have a fair fight with your opponents and consistently die. No matter how good your mechanics are, no matter how well you're playing in other aspects, you're never going to be able to have an advantaged fight. Now, this leads me to the next thing, and this is high ground. And high ground is similar to natural cover because the ground that you're standing on is technically a piece of cover that if you back up, the enemies can't see you anymore. So it is a form of natural cover, but high ground also offers a couple of extra options to you for a great piece of positioning. Number one, it allows you to avoid the effectiveness of certain characters. If you're on the high ground and there's a Ryan on the low ground, besides a fire strike here and there, he can't do anything to you, which means that it's a lot easier for you to make plays and shoot his back line and not have him get all up on your face and start swinging at you. In addition to that, high ground naturally protects part of your body, meaning that only a certain percentage of it is going to peek out over the top as you're looking down on a person, and their whole body is going to show to you, which makes your shots a little bit easier to hit than the person that's down below. Last up, abilities are way easier to hit when you're on the high ground. If you're trying to nade someone from up top down below, really easy to get a 2, 3, 4-man nade. But if you're trying to do it from the low ground and throw it up top or even on level ground, it's a lot harder to do. So having that high ground is going to allow you to make plays easier and make better plays. Now, tying into these first two golden rules, when we're talking about natural cover, there are going to be times where you need to leave a piece of cover and move up and push objectives and things like that. But I want you to, instead of walking in a straight line in the open, walk from one piece of cover to the next. Think of it like a zigzag, where you're taking control of one place, being effective from one place, and then when you want to move, you move to another next best piece of cover. So you're stair-stepping, you're zigzagging from cover to cover. When we're talking about high ground, you want to make sure that you are clearing and challenging high ground. If you allow yourself to walk low ground, never clearing or challenging the high ground, all the opponents get these benefits we just talked about, and you're stuck in the low ground getting hit by damage, getting hit by nades, getting hit by cooldowns, while it's harder for you to deal damage to them. This is why it's really important that you're spending time to clear high grounds and fight for high grounds. We'll go into more advanced detail about this later, but the general idea is that good positions try to deny other good positions. Now, last up with high ground also gives you the option to pursue. Like, people understand that like a dash is mobility, but falling is also mobility. Gravity can be a form of an ability. If you're on the low ground and I'm on the high ground and you're weak, I can jump off the high ground and chase you and make that fight happen just like that. Or if I'm a close range character like a queen or a reaper, I can appear on you at a moment's notice from the high ground to the low ground using gravity. But if I'm on the high ground, it's not very easy for you to pursue me out of nowhere if I start to lose the fight. There are certain characters that can, of course, Kiriko, Hanzo, Genji, but it's very few when you consider the entire roster, and that's another important piece of high ground. It allows you to not only cover yourself and protect yourself, but it also allows you to pursue when you want to pursue and do it that much quicker. Now, the next general idea that you need to ingrain in your mind is effective range. Whether or not a position is going to be good for you is oftentimes going to depend on your character's effective range. Now, if you're playing by a rock in cover, you're safe, right? You have a little rock behind you, maybe you're on the high ground. That's all and cool, but if you're freaking 50 feet away from the enemy and you're Reaper, it's not a very effective position, because while you're definitely super survivable, you're not going to die, you also aren't effective, right? So generally, you need to try to put yourself in positions that adhere to natural cover at least, and sometimes high ground, but also allow you to be in your effective range. So if you're a Widowmaker, you can play very far away near a piece of cover and be protected by the cover and be protected by the range, because other characters that have closer effective ranges aren't going to be that effective against you if you're playing really far away. But on the flip side, if you're a character that's closer ranges, someone like Reinhardt, oftentimes part of the challenge is using a combination of cover and high ground and your ability use to get close into your effective range, because from far away you're not going to be very effective. So you go from one cover to the next, you take ground, and you put yourself in a position to close in the gap so that you actually will be effective, and you're using cover as a means to get there where you will be effective. Now, I referenced this several times, but something that you need to consider when trying to figure out how to play and how to position is a good position will always give you options. The option to retreat if you need to, the option to push in if you want to, the option to maybe grab a health pack to keep you a little bit sustained without the help of your team. More options, the better. This allows you to have a plan no matter what happens, whether your team starts to all die, whether the enemy starts popping ultimates, whether your team starts to get picks, whatever happens, you have something that you can do from that position. Maybe the position is really strong because there's another strong position that's nearby that's more aggressive, and if you start to gain ground, you can move there really easily. That could be something that makes it stronger because of the option. Maybe there's a mega that's like 10 feet behind you that you could easily retreat to within cover, and then you can grab it. So if a diver chases you, you can easily go and grab that. That's more options. That gives the position more power. And something that's incredibly important is always repositioning to the next strongest position, because when a position is good at one stage of a fight, it might not always be good. There might be better positions, or the position might be compromised because the enemies are wrapping around, they're too strong, they swap things up, they're popping ultimates, whatever the case may be. So what I would say is every time a key cooldown is used, an ultimate is used, or someone dies on either side, I want you to reevaluate whether or not there is a better position position for you to have. This is something that is going to allow you to start reminding yourself more. Now, eventually you won't need this and you'll do it automatically, but to start to get it in your head and start to remind yourself to reposition and take better positions, use this as a reminder so that you do this in your game. Because I can't tell you how many times I see someone in a VOD review win a fight, they wipe the enemy team, and they just kind of sit there. They kind of AFK. Maybe they push up a little bit, but they could have routed to the high ground. They could have routed to a better piece of cover. They could have played in a position that better set them up for the next fight. Maybe there's an ultimate that they could play way outside the range. Regardless of what it is that would change where you would position, the important part is to remind yourself to do so, and then you're going to start thinking about it more critically and actually positioning better instead of just losing a fight and you have no idea why. At the end of the day, playing bad positions is just setting you up for failure. And you're going to lose the game without even really getting a beat on why you lost the game. Another thing that you should consider is team-controlled space versus enemy-controlled space. So how I like to think of it is any of the areas that your team is holding and occupies and you and your team can kind of move around in safely without dying or taking that much damage or any damage at all. That would be team-controlled space. And I want you to visualize it as green area, right? That's green area for your team. You're safe to move around there without using cooldowns, and you can move between cover and cover. You're not going to die out of nowhere. The other type of space is enemy-controlled space. This is like in between, any place in between where the enemy is, that is like heavily red area, where if you were there, you're either using cooldowns to stay alive or you're dying, right? This is the space that if you are right smack dab in the middle, 3 people are going to look at you, you're going to just get melted. That's heavily red. And then everything in the middle is like yellow, right? It's like the combination where the closer you get to enemy-controlled space, the more likely you are to just get killed or dying, or you're going to have to use cooldowns in order to stay alive. And the closer you are to your team space, the more resources your team can provide you, the more healing, the more attention. And what I would say is if you ever cross into contested or enemy territory, it needs to be done with intent. Like, this is the space oftentimes DPS will fight in the yellow a lot, and it's important that if you ever go past the yellow into the red, go in for a dive, go into the backline, go into the enemy team, it needs to be done fast and it needs to be done deliberate. If you're just standing around in enemy controlled space, just vibing, shooting, just doing a little bit of damage without any reason or point or anything, especially if you're not perfectly adhering to natural cover, high ground, effective range, you're going to die. You're going to get caught out and killed because in that space, there's no team resources for you. And the enemy has so much resources there that any fight you take is going to get healed up. Any fight you take is going to often be a 3v1 against you. And that's a super important concept to make. I'm not saying to never make plays in that space. I'm saying if you do, it needs to be done fast, it needs to be done deliberate, and ideally, you want to get the hell out of there the second you get some value. But the last thing is a pop quiz. When do you think it's okay to forego position and just push in? There is a time. I'm gonna give you a second to think about it. It's when you have an overwhelming advantage in a team fight. If you killed 2, 3, 4 people, you want to go in and you want to close the fight out. You want to force the engagement. And this means that it doesn't really matter what your effective range is. It doesn't really matter about cover or high ground. You want to close in, you want to clear the fight, and you want to collapse on the remaining people. So even if you're a long distance character, you typically want to close in that fight, close out the team, because you have such an overwhelming advantage that if you pool your resources and value together, the enemy team will just vaporize and you'll be able to wipe them. And then afterwards, before the next fight, you're going to go set up in a better position again. This is the cycle. You fight for these positions, you use your positions to get better advantages, and eventually you get a big advantage in a fight. Then you close in the fight, giving up your position, but closing in, and then you go back to great position, setting up for the next fight. That's the cycle, and if you stick with these golden rules, you'll have better positions, you'll be more effective, and you'll start to climb a lot quicker. But anyways, if you have any big questions for me, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for coming by. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.